During this Stocktake session, I want to pass on some tips from myself and my colleagues here in the support and professional services teams. I am using the latest build of Oliver, build 7 and patch 17. I'll start with a few general recommendations for a successful Stocktake that we've come up with. There is a guide in the help files here. We suggest that you read this first before you start a Stocktake. If you're not sure what to do not embark on a large Stocktake. Try it out if you can on a small, easily defined section, like a reference collection. You can delete the Stocktake without completing the full process or affecting your data. How long should a Stocktake take? Not a prolonged period of time is our recommendation. If you have items going in and out of the library, you have little hope of accurately accounting for your library stock. We also recommend that you close the library while you do a large Stocktake. You don't want students and staff coming in and taking books off the shelf and reshelving them potentially all over the place. Data consistency in your catalogue is also vital for a successful Stocktake, especially if you want to do a partial Stocktake. This is a problem that the support team come across quite a lot, especially when a Stocktake against the classification range has been attempted. To check data consistency, we suggest that you run a shelf check report from the copies database in cataloging. I can run a shelf check from a branch. So if I run a search, then I need to expand that if it goes over a certain number of records, so I get the full list, and then I can go to reports and then select shelf check. So to do a shelf check, a shelf list report, the information needs to be in branch, collection, and sortable classification order. The later Build 7 version of Oliver will do this automatically. If you don't have this version, you may find that you need to sort the fields yourself, so bringing them over from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. It is like sorting the list you get when you do a search. So I can produce that report. I already have one here that we can look at. So you can look at the report to see if you have problems with consistency of your data. So that could be classification. It could be collections. Now, the smallest section that the support team recommend that you do is collection. But again, the same applies. It must be applied consistently. If you run this report beforehand, you'll know if smaller sections will be feasible before you even start. You can do a smaller section search, so I could define that perhaps by collection and resource loan category, but remember, resource loan category has no part to play in a Stocktake. Classification by range, doing a search for that, is not so simple. Now, I'm going to do a Stocktake on my physics and chemistry books. So I've already worked out a search strategy here, which I have shown you in an earlier presentation. So I'm going to copy this and paste it into the Any Words field. So what I'm starting with here is classification greater than or equal to 530 in quotes, and classification less than or equal to 549.99, etc. So I'm going to get all the books within that range. So also doing a search like this gives you an idea of the approximate number of items that you're going to be dealing with. So it can help you plan the time out, so how long it's going to take. You still may want to do a broader search to catch any anomalies. Now, just before processing your books for the Stocktake, do a shelf tidy up to put them in their correct place on the shelf. The point of the Stocktake is to identify material that has been removed without going on loan or previously missing. So you don't want stuff all over the place and not where it should be and potentially miss it. Again, if you're doing a smaller Stocktake, I think that's quite important. Your largest task in the Stocktake is going to scan the books, scan their barcodes. You have two ways of doing this in your Stocktake. So you can scan the items in directly. So this may mean you're having to bring the books to your computer to scan them directly into the Stocktake. You can also use a scanner like a CipherLab 1166 that has a base at the computer that allows you to take the actual scanner itself without moving the books. That is dependent, however, on the range of the scanner. Now, if you do use this type of barcode scanner, we suggest there is another person at the computer to spot any problems. So where the book is, let's say, misshelved, if you get that type of message, it can be removed from the shelf at that point. Now, with this method, if there are problems with Stocktake, you haven't defined the shelf range correctly, you may find you're having to start all over again and scanning in the barcodes again. So to avoid this, but it's important, I recommend that you scan the barcodes into a text file that can be saved and reloaded later if necessary. Now this can be done using the scanner with the base described earlier, but you'll probably find the easiest method is plugging in a standard USB scanner into a laptop, putting that on a trolley and transporting it around your shelves. There are a number of Opticon and CipherLab scanners that we have marketed that you would be able to use for this. You would be scanning into a text file, so that would be Notepad in Windows or TextEdit in Macintosh operating system. The end product will be a list of barcodes. Save the file in a sensible place for retrieval later. If you can't connect your laptop to Oliver, then use a USB flash drive. It'll make it easier to take the items to your Oliver computer. There are also portable barcode scanners available that save barcodes on a file for later transfer. The scanner that we resell that would do this is the Opticon 2001 Pocket Memory Scanner. So as you can see, I've created a file for this session and it shows you what you should end up with, a list of barcodes. The start of the Stocktake in Oliver proper is to create it. I've created one earlier and I have paired it with a previous Stocktake. So name your Stocktakes consistently using the year and other consistent labeling. Keep them, don't delete them, as they can be used for summary comparison reports produced at the conclusion of the latest Stocktake. You'll find that these summary reports aren't of the best value in your first Stocktake. Now, when adding sections to the Stocktake, you may find that the highest level is going to be the branch. Now, you don't have to define a branch if you've only got the one branch. But you may find then that the next lowest level that you can use is the collection. And I mentioned before, this is what the support team recommend. So we can define it by the collection. Now, classification, you can define it with or without a collection. Without a collection or a branch, your items need to be on the same place in the shelf if you define by the classification. Now, if you have inconsistencies in your classifications, then using classification from and to is going to be difficult, hence the recommendation that collection is the lowest level. Now, if you have reasonably consistent data, you can further define your stock take by the classification. I may find items that are not correct and I could change them during the stock take, but I don't generally recommend this as it distracts from the main task in hand. I would also not continue the catalogue during the stock take, as these items need to be accounted for also. So it reinforces the need for you to not have a stock take to go on too long, so normal library processes can continue. Now, I'm going to define my stock take with a smaller classification range for physics and chemistry books, and I've used Dewey classification. Now you enter the value that is entered directly into the classification field. If you've used codes in the collection, do not include these in your shelf definition. So I'm talking about in management and collections that you have a code in here, and that's inserted in front of any classification that you enter. For my stock take, the class range starts at the value of 530. If I were to leave this, only the items starting with 530 will be included in the stock take. The help text explains how these classification definitions work. So classification from value of 1 will be treated as 1 star and will include everything in 1 to 199. Probably get everything in the 530s there. But I want to define up to the end of the physics and chemistry books. So I have put in a value here of 549.999, etc. I haven't put in a suffix here, even though I've used it in my classifications, because that will be accounted for because this is what the classification starts with. It naturally takes in the suffixes that I've added. So just a quick note here for, let's say, fiction items. So if you use the letter F for fiction, and then you use the suffix, the first 3 letters of the author's surname, you can see that I've put in FA to take in everything starting with A, and then EZZ to take us to everything up to the end of the E's. And then I've repeated the sequences until I've got to the very end, to the end of the Z's. So I can add multiple sections to a stock take, so it helps me organize things. So if I have several people scanning in items, I can define a range for them. So there's no problem in doing this. It may make it easier to handle practically. Going back to my physics and chemistry stock take, I know that in my catalogue I have some records that have NF directly in the classification field. So I have added another section to accommodate that. What will happen is that when I scan items in, those items will be recognized as being seen, but possibly being scanned in the wrong section. So you can adapt this type of setup for various situations to make sure, as far as you can, that you can account for inconsistencies, which will happen if you've got more than one person, let's say, cataloguing items. Items on loan are fine. They are accounted for. Now I'm going to load in my text file into my main section. So I'm going to import those items. Items on loan but on the shelf can be returned automatically by the import process. We recommend you tick this. Previously missing items now on the shelf will have their status changed to available also if this is ticked. However, for this exercise, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to browse for my file and then I'm going to upload that. All of the items loaded are displayed, and those that are fine will have no error, and for the items that do have problems, you will see an error message. You can restrict that further by clicking Error Copies here. So the types of errors that you're going to get, this first item, it has the status of missing, so it's not supposed to be on the shelf. In transit is another status where it's not supposed to be on the shelf. This item here was not found. So this may have never been catalogued or it may have been weeded. Now weeded items will not be identified as such, so you'll need to check the weeded copies area to be certain. The other error that you'll get is that it's in the wrong section. So it's got the wrong classification or it's got the wrong collection, so it's misshelved. Other error that you may get here is that if an item on loan was not able to be returned automatically, you need to return process that in circulation desk. So this is going to happen when you have items that are reserved or are accruing fines. So you've got to scan those in the circulation desk area. Now, before going on to the next step, you must also scan in items that have been returned. So the next step is processing, and this is going to identify the items that have not yet been scanned but should be on the shelf. You can process a section, but again, we recommend that you process all if you have multiple sections, especially if we've added in a section to account for anomalies like NF in the classification when it usually should not happen. So it'll tell you that the item has not been accounted for in its proper section. Processing, we do not recommend that you say yes to scanning in shelf order, even if you have. The shelf order, as defined by the Oliver Stocktake, can be knocked out of sync with things like a suffix being in lowercase when it's usually in uppercase, or apostrophes in the suffix. I've also noticed in the past that the date of accession of an item can affect the shelf order. This doesn't seem to be happening in the latest build 7. So I'm going to say no to this. On completion, you see the summary screen where you can see the stats on the progress, particularly those items not scanned. So if I click on this and I click Error Copies, you'll see the items that we previously identified, and then down the bottom usually are the items that are not scanned. If I go back to the NF section that I created here, go to Error, you can see that it says that it was scanned in a different location. So it's been accounted for in the Stocktake, but it's just not in the section that Oliver thinks it should be in. So there's no need for you to scan that in again. It has been accounted for. Now, you would then produce a report for the items that have not been scanned, so you can check around the library and the school to find them. So you can isolate those by going to Stocktake on the right hand side and searching for that. We can, if I take this out, so we've got the Stocktake that we're looking at here. You can define it by the status, and then just run that. And then we do have the items here, some of the ones that we had a problem with, so it's the wrong status, and these ones here that have available but haven't been scanned yet. So then you can go and do a report. So there are several reports that you can run here, so they can be sorted by classification, so it's a shelf list, or Stocktake missing items. So you would use these reports to go around the library, the school, and hopefully find some of those items, and you would go back and you would go into your Stocktake and scan those items in. So again, I would do this in my main section. So if I scan the item in, so it tells me that it's found that copy that was previously missing. I'll just do one more. Now we've got the same message coming up here. And just one more. Yep. So we are getting the same message here. So they have been dealt with. And we finish that off. So you would go through that process, so you'll get to the point whereby you think, right, I have accounted for everything that I can. You do need to be sure of that, because the finalization process is going to change the items that were not scanned. So these items here, their status is going to be changed to missing. So with a Stocktake, with sections, you should finalize all. So again, it's making sure that the sections that you added to account for data inconsistencies are included. The support team have very specific recommendations for this. Now the Stocktake finalization process is run via housekeeping, and there is an option that needs to be ticked for that to take place. Now they recommend that you have it ticked for the process, and once that you've completed it for the Stocktake that you're doing, that tick is removed immediately. Now there have been several instances where finalization has been run in error, and changing the status of all those items back to what they were is usually not possible. The support team have had to intervene and change the items back to available, which is not necessarily going to be correct. So the cause was not obvious for this finalization, but it may have been done in error. So someone's just clicked finalize, but it won't actually run unless the housekeeping is set to run it. You will notice that there is, in the later versions of the system, unfinalize or unfinalize all. So if you do realize that you've done this in error, you can unfinalize it. So I'm going to finalize all once more. And then go to System and Housekeeping. There is the Stocktake finalization option that is ticked. So if I were to leave this for my housekeeping to run, then it will be done then. The reason why it was placed in the housekeeping process was it was found in earlier versions of the system that finalization could take a very long time. So it was better to run it overnight, for instance. Now, you can run it immediately if you want to. So I can just edit the housekeeping, and I can go down to the bottom of the screen, Again, making sure that this is ticked, and I can choose the option for Stocktake finalization regular process. I can choose that and I can save it. So it tells me that it's running. You can't check the log file. What you would do is you would go back to cataloging and to Stocktake and go into your Stocktake, and it will tell you that it's completed. So what we have here now is that it's showing us that so many items are now missing or disposed. And also this item is available now, it was missing. If I go into the item here and I can click on the barcode here, you will see that it has here status reason was not scanned in a Stocktake. So its status is missing, and it tells you the date that that was actually done, so the date of our finalization. So I can now run the various summary reports. So there are several reports here, including for all Stocktakes. But if I was just interested in this particular Stocktake and its associated ones, I can run these three. So as I said before, they're not of great benefit until you've done your second and subsequent Stocktakes, because it tells you what you started with stock-wise, what you've added since that previous Stocktake to give you a total, and then items that have been missing and taken off. So the summary report just gives you this very short report. Then we have with cost, so it gives you your cost details there. And then the summary with items. Now this report can be quite long if you've lost a lot of items, but this can be very useful to show the school authorities how much money that you might be losing for all these items going missing. So they are very useful for your higher management reporting. Now that is the end of the Stocktake proper, but the final task that you may want to run sometime after you finish this is to delete items previously made missing. So we can do that in copies. So you can search for items that are missing or disposed prior to a particular time. So I can choose the date. So I'd be choosing a date, let's say the day after my Stocktake was done, and I could again restrict by various criteria just to be certain with that. So again, I'm going to cheat here and just copy my shelf range here. Notice that we have this option to choose items that are actually missing or disposed, because if items do turn up later, their status might be changed, but the missing or disposed date may not actually be removed. So this is only going to pick up items that have a status of missing. So I can run this, and then I have 29 items that are missing here before that date, so I can run the weed all option there. So I hope that this session has been a benefit to you. Thank you for attending, and I hope you'll join me again for our next session in June.